Welcome, everyone, to the inaugural official episode of Jen and Jake Talk. I'm Jen.
I'm Jake.
We're gonna really quick retcon the start of this being the Midnight Mass video that we did a while back. That was just kind of a pet project that the more Jake and I talked about it, the more we realized just how much we had to say. And that's what's led to, this, our Bleach series, and this episode that you're watching right now. And so we thought it would be nice to just put a little semi-official ribbon on anytime Jake and I get together to talk about stuff that only we can in ways that only we care about.
hmm It's a niche appeal, I won't lie, but thank you for viewing anyway.
Right, it's our niche and we're happy to occupy it. And today we got a hankering to return to what started off close to what started off this show, which is recent vampire media. We're talking about the 2024 film Salem's Lot, directed by Gary Doberman. And we are big fans of Stephen King. I'm not as well
I
read as you are, Jake, but both of us are especially big fans of Salem's Lot. To start off with my context for this, the first time I read the book, I was 19. I was working in a water park, and so I would leave. I would like rotate stations and do different things throughout the day, but I would leave my copy of the book in the like shack next to the little mini golf course that nobody went to. And so anytime like it was my rotation, I would just sit there and read the book the whole time I was there. I got through it so fast. Jake,
and
what's
it's a
your
thick motherfucker
experience?
too.
Yeah, it's a thick motherfucker. What's your experience with Salem's Lot?
Salem's Lot was one of the first Kings I ever read, like in its entirety. I remember the first exposure I ever had to King was my school's bookmobile. I don't know if people know what that is these days, honestly. I don't even know if people my age will even remember what that is, but I went to a private Catholic school and every week there was a little truck that came from the local library that would let all of us check out some stuff in it, and it was basically like a little bus, and it had a big back room in it, and we got to go inside and pick whatever we wanted to read. And I picked Stephen King's It because I had heard of it before. I don't really know what incentivized me to do that. And my teacher was like, "Bro, are you sure you want to read that?" And I'm like, "Hell yeah, dude." And then, like, I can't remember if it was like my third or fourth, just because I kept going back to the Stephen King well over and over again. And I read it at a point where I did not remember much about it until I met Morgan, and then we were both huge King heads. So then I decided to reread it my either senior year of high school or the first year I was in college, maybe in the liminal state between the two. But I read it then and was like, holy shit, I fucking love this story so much. Like, there's so much about Salem's Lot that I think really accentuates the things about King that I truly love. And like, there's also 10% of it that's just Stephen King describing the layout of roads in Salem's Lot that really just like that's the only problem this book has. Like it's a 9.5 out of 10, and that other point 0.5 is like, all right, buddy, I we get it. The roads, they're complicated. All right, we get it. Thank you. But what's curious is that after this, I became familiar with the fact that there are other adaptations of Salem's Lot in the form of the anime Shiki, which is a light novel adaptation of Salem's Lot that was turned into an anime that I had no clue was based on it going into it. And then I was like, boy, howdy, I sure am noticing some similarities to this. And I fucking dig the shit out of that too. So basically, that happened. Then Midnight Mass happened, and it's just like we are getting like reskinned versions of Salem's Lot, and they're all cool. What the fuck's going on here?
Which I guess leads us to our central question of you're right, Salem's Lot, despite its, considerable subversiveness from the horror that inspires it, has become a kind of mainstream cultural object. Like I remember being in school before I read the book and having teachers who would just randomly talk about scenes from the Toby Hooper movie. Uh,
The flying
it,
kid, that's the most iconic scene from it that I remember.
yeah, the flying boy, the design of Straker in the movie in general has become a pretty
Hmm.
iconic one,
Hmm.
which I want to talk more about when we get into this. But
Oh, I have thoughts.
we're here. It's 2024, and there's a new adaptation of Salem's Lot that has a very, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, a very conjuring vibe to it.
Hmm.
The writer director is a Conjuring universe veteran, even though he's also written other Stephen King adaptations. Like I think he has a script credit on the It movies.
He does. He does. And I'm inclined to believe that despite the multiple writer credits attached to that series, that I can basically attribute most of what was done to the final product to Dauberman, just because you have names like Cary Fukunaga and stuff who did the first draft of the script, but like I mainly credit what the final versions of those are to him, at least as far as I know.
Yeah. So this guy Doberman, like I said, he was a Conjuring universe veteran. He wrote all three of the Annabelle movies. He directed the third one.
Yep.
Um,
The Nun
wrote what?
movies, he wrote those as well.
Yeah, he has a writing credit on both of the. No, he only wrote the first Nun film. He only has a producer credit on the
Oh,
Nun 2.
right.
Um,
Probably for the best.
he's also got a writing credit on the upcoming Until Dawn film.
There's
We're
what
gonna wait. We're gonna wait and
uh,
see how that goes. We're gonna wait and see how that goes.
yeah, yes. That is its own that's its
Future
own thing.
episode, possibly. Um,
Yes, I'm definitely down for that.
but I want to start with the most befuddling element of all this, which is that for some reason this is direct to HBO Max and not in theaters right now. What do you think's going on there?
David Zaslav, that's what's going on there. I know that this movie had some kind of troubled production, but beyond that, I don't really know much about it just because I'm not sure how much of that has been made aware, made public, made whatever, but it's like basically any creative decision that has happened in the last 4 or so years that has been any kind of bad can probably be attributed to that man. Like I want to say at one point this was supposed to be a television show, like an episodic one, and then I think it was later retrofitted into a movie. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I remember the production of it starting as one thing and then ultimately becoming another.
I'm browsing on like Wikipedia referenced sources. This was announced in 2019, shot in 2021, so a post-COVID movie
Woof.
almost in its entirety, at least from a production standpoint. Um, apparently finished in mid 2022 after a period of reshoots. So this has been on the shelf for over 2 years now, potentially.
Yeah.
Premiered at Beyond Fest just about a month ago. Now it's here on HBO Max. I'm frankly considering the fact that the horror theater competition is tight right now between Terrifier 3 and Smile 2.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
They,
not a
I
comp
Smile
maybe
2
not a
especially, I
competition
think is a knockout, or at least is going to be.
maybe not a competition that Warner Brothers wanted to wade into, and so they wanted to get out ahead by putting this direct to video, which I mean it worked for Malignant back when that was coming out. That was also a
Hmm.
direct to video. I don't know why I'm calling them direct to video. That's basically what they are, but we don't talk about them that way.
I mean, it's whatever the modern equivalent of that is now. Like it's not the same, but it still feels like the same thing, I guess, culturally. Like I feel like we relegate streaming to the direct to video thing in our minds, like subconsciously almost.
At least with the movies, I still do that. With the TV shows, I have a bit more grace for. There's
I
definitely
agree,
like
yeah.
as rigid as it's gotten, that used to be an experimental way to do television. Uh,
Hmm.
but the movies, I feel like still, and I remember even back in like 2017 when it was like, yeah, talking about Netflix movies was the same way that we talked about direct to video.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Not
There
to
was like
not to
always
degrade it,
exceptions. there were exceptions by like some people would come in, like, you got Fincher making The Killer and stuff like that. We've had like sprinkles of like actual auteur people working on Netflix stuff, but those have really been the exception that proves the rule.
Yeah, Max, I feel like doesn't have as big of a reputation for direct to service
Yeah.
slop, mainly because with the Warner Brothers connection, they can get big movies on there very quickly. And it's,
Hmm.
all the big HBO shows. That's what people are signing up for. Um, but this feels like a COVID movie
I
where
yeah, it does.
I don't want to say it was like cut down from a ridiculous length, but it feels like we're missing a significant chunk of movie.
I was immediately skeptical when I looked at this and saw the runtime of 113 minutes. And I was like, if you came to me as a Warner Brothers executive and said, I will fund a Salem's Lot movie that you can have full creative control over, even though that's definitely not the case here, that you will have full creative control over, the thing is, it has to be less than 2 hours. I would decline that offer instantly because that's insane. Like, this is a big ass book, and I'm not saying you got to adapt all of it. I'm not even saying you got to adapt half of it. Really, you got to get a couple essential plot threads. That's all that I really ask. But at the same time, I still don't know how you can realistically get across what the setting of, because like the star of Salem's Lot is the location, is Salem's Lot. And in order to portray it in all of its actual complexity and to like to sketch this environment in a way that will like do it justice, I just don't think that this is possible.
Yeah, and let's get into the movie proper using that as a segue. Um, the biggest signal that I knew something was up with this adaptation, strictly from a book to script standpoint, is the, not to belabor the point, perfectly linear, clean to a fault structure that this has.
Yeah, it's the thing with King is that he likes to jump around a lot, like even when he wasn't even when he wasn't in his cokehead phase, he really likes to bounce around. He's got multiple protagonists, multiple characters, multiple plot threads, and Salem's Lot is no exception. It's one of his earlier books, but it's still one where, Ben Mears is like the driving force of the plot, but I wouldn't even say that the book gives him that much more attention than the other characters in Salem's Lot. Like the fact that it basically starts with the first legitimately scary scene in the book is not a terrible way to get things started, but at the same time I was like, we skipped a lot to get here.
Yeah, so to overview the plot for those unfamiliar, the premise and the plot of Salem's Lot is that basically our protagonist Ben Mears is a ambiguously washed up writer who has come back to his hometown for inspiration, and all throughout the book he's recalling a supernatural event that he witnessed in this spooky house that was owned by a Depression era hitman named Hubie Marston, and so it's always referred to as the Marston House.
Yes.
um at the same time, this new antique shop, Straker and Barlow's, opens, run by the ambiguously European aristocrat Richard Straker and his unseen business partner Kurt Barlow. And around the same time, people start disappearing. All we get at first to hint towards this is that there is some kind of illegal shipping operation going on involving a suspiciously shaped box.
What could be inside? Ooh. And we also just sort of get like an overview of Salem's Lot. We see this town sketched in very vivid detail as being a quite idyllic sort of, East Coast just sort of place that like, it's got its problems, but like overall the people there are generally kind of like amicable. It's and in the movie, it actually does go to lengths to portray it as being as idyllic as it kind of sounds.
Yeah, yeah. Even though this book is set in 1975, it has a very like 60s feel to
Hmm.
its setting, which is kind of the thematic center of it all. Is for me, what makes Salem's Lot work so well is that the book is kind of about and this seems very cliche now, but like the seedy underbelly of small town America. And it works so well because it does such a great job at portraying not just the naivete, but also the self-denial of that
Hmm.
fact in a lot of its characters, especially Ben, along with the naivete but savviness of its youngest protagonist, Mark Petrie,
Yes.
who both kind of realize that this shit isn't all it's cracked up to be. And the emotional core of the book is a literal and metaphorical abandonment of Salem's Lot as a safe haven for the two of them. As spoilers, the vampires essentially win in the end. Too many people have been turned. They can't fight them all. So at the end of the book, the two of them, Ben and Mark, who's a young boy, decide to run away. And there's a short epilogue where they come back and set fire to the town. But what comes of this would be left unstated for a long, long time by King, expanded upon later in a couple of the Dark Tower books, I think touch on this, as well as a short story, One for the Road. Yeah, that one, Wolves of the Kala. There's also a short story fairly recent called One for the Road that involves a couple characters who are not in Salem's Lot but have heard the commotion. It's set a couple years later during a snowstorm, having to go to Salem's Lot to rescue a man's wife and daughter who become stranded and seeing a bit more than they bargained for. It's a very nice bottle story that also, for those who want that, wraps up a couple of those ambiguities of what the result of that final act is. But the film kind of cuts out a lot of the extra stuff. And this is, I think,
Hmm.
my main problem with it, where they go pretty straightforwardly in setting up like Ben is our hero, Ben is our
Hmm.
protagonist. And so all of the other characters are kind of sanded down to reflect their connection to him and the direct problem, which is that there are fucking vampires everywhere. And so you miss a lot of the books wandering between different, very vibrant personalities. You don't get as much of exploring the town as a character and the things that happen to the people within it if they don't connect to the direct struggle between Ben and, to a lesser extent, Mark, and the supernatural threat that's coming after them. And that's, I think, my biggest issue with it. Even though I will say, what they end up doing with it ends up making for a acceptable narrative.
It's very strange. Like if presented with a specific set of limitations, this is simultaneously about as good as I could reasonably expect someone to do, and also highlights the issue with the format in general, in that you can do like there are lots of parts of this that could have been executed better for certain, but at the same time I also just like fundamentally this is a story that you need to marinate in. Like if we're going by like the whole medium is the message thing, like this needs to be a series. Like I don't know how a movie could feasibly work, like, and it loses a lot of the identity of the story in not giving you a wider scope, because that's what the story is. Like, not to say we don't have a really solid through line narrative with characters like Ben and Susan, but at the same time, like, we need that to be a cog in the machine of the rest of the story. If it's just the story, it limits what the appeal is, at least to me anyway, because like again, it's called Salem's Lot. That's what it needs to be about. Whereas this is kind of just sort of the Ben Mears show starring Ben Mears and also he is in Salem's Lot. Like it's a bit incidental feeling and it's strange because there's part of me laments like I don't hold this against the movie, but like I really think that the source material has some really interesting things to say about gentrification. And this is a story that took place before we knew what that was. Like, societally speaking, it was like this wasn't exactly a thing that was on everybody's mind when this book was written. And I feel like when you go back and read it with a modern context, it's like, oh, not only is this about like the dark sort of, the blue velvet, seedy underbelly of small town America, but it is also about how industry and foreign entities can come in and, take over and ultimately destroy an idyllic American setting like that. And I feel like that there is a lot of stuff that you can mine that in a contemporary movie. Like there's just so much there that I feel like you can add to it. And part of me just sort of laments, like, they don't really do that much with this. And, again, that's just kind of wishful thinking on my part. But if you're going to update Salem's Lot, then I don't know. You got to do something with it that's just not what the book did. And that's my issue is that it's just like it's the book. It sure is the book. Like everything that they adapt in the movie, more or less, is in the novel, and it's occasionally done quite well. It's just that I am always aware of the missing pieces. It's just like this is like there's this one scene that happens relatively like in the I guess in the first act, maybe beginning of the second, where Ben and Susan have their first real interaction at the drive-in movie theater. And it was like, wow, I'm finally watching two people talk to one another. This is kind of refreshing because the bizarre thing about this movie is that like for the first 25 minutes, I was not feeling this shit at all. I was like, okay, we got this weird color filter going on, and it is ugly as sin to look at. Like, if you have any preconceived notions about direct to streaming movies and like the way they look, and they have that kind of Netflix in-house look to them where they're all shot with the same cameras and they all look like an episode of Ozark. It's like that, but worse. Like it like they have this weird pink filter that's on Salem's Lot when they're showing it as being like, oh, it's like kind of like the 60s, and it's like, oh, look at it in the nice little music and I'm just like, I get what you're going for. It's just that this is so garish and it just kind of hops around haphazardly and the dialogue is odd. And I'm just kind of like, this is just going to be one of those things where it's just not going to nail it. It's just like, this is just a movie that's used like just sort of grafting Salem's Lot skin over it to be a vampire movie. And then there's a sequence that happens like 30 minutes in, and I was like, yo, what? And then I was locked the fuck in because it genuinely seems like every other scene in this movie is visually inspired, and every other scene is flat as A4 paper.
And here's where I think a knowledge of the filmography of Mr. Doberman comes in handy. Because this guy, I I've never said this on the podcast, but I'm a long time hater of the Conjuring movies. And every single one of them. I don't like any of them. I like the first two. The first two are just fine. I like
Okay,
the
then
James Wan
I'm right
ones.
there with you then.
I like the James Wan ones, and I like the second Annabelle movie because it's a little freaky. And that's it. The rest of them, I could not give two fucks.
I mean,
I
Devil Made Me
watched
Do
them
It
all
is
though.
legit fucking like straight garbo.
I've watched them all. I will say that. I feel like
Hmm.
I've studied this. I've studied this. I feel like this is my perfect time to coalesce like my opinion on what's wrong with so many of these like big studio horror movies that we're getting, and this isn't even exclusive to the Conjuring movies, which is that we
Mm-mm.
have this subgenre of I'm gonna use the Martin Scorsese aphorism, which is like horror movies that feel like roller coasters.
Roller coaster horror is a great way of putting it.
which is and that's not to say that that can't be a good thing, right? What that
Malignant is a
implies,
roller coaster horror movie, and it's an excellent one.
right? What that implies is that you're going to have a very strong sense of pace. Nothing scary is ever going to happen during the day. Uh, the reveal of whatever your monster is going to be very drawn out all the time. Even when you think it isn't, there's always something that is going to surprise you around the corner. And it's always going to be a period piece. Lately, I feel like that's become an issue that all these movies
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
Not that I'm clamoring for them to like do Salem's Lot in a post-COVID environment setting.
But in a
You
modern
couldn't.
context, I feel like that's a story that still works.
I
I
feel
mean,
like you could
that's what they
definitely
did with it. They
do.
moved that 30 years forward in both timelines.
That's true. I feel like you could get away with that pre-COVID. You can't get away with that now.
Yeah, that's
Unless you're just not gonna address it, you can't say it's 2024 and we're doing Salem's Lot.
a deeply unenviable position that lots of filmmakers are put in. And like, I can understand the inclination to just be like, oh, I'm handed this property. Let's set it as far back in the past as humanly fucking possible. Like, okay, that's understandable, but at the same time, it leads to a homogeneity that, like, I was kind of already done with this after the second Conjuring movie, and now I'm like really done with it.
Yeah, it has a lot of the same it has a lot of the same filmmaking quirks and frankly issues that I have with Conjuring movies, which is like the colors are ugly.
Oh God.
The blocking is atrocious, even in the horror scenes.
They break the 180 rule so many times in this movie, and I was just like, I gotta turn off my film nerd brain. I gotta do it, but God damn it, it happens like 5 times.
And the jump scare sequences, I'll just call them that,
Yeah.
because they're all the same, where like
Mm.
it starts out real quiet and the character's walking around and then something small happens, like something's outside. And so they go outside. I'm doing one of the scenes in the movie verbatim. So they
Yes.
go outside. They start looking around. They look in one direction. There's nothing there. They look in another direction. There's nothing there. They go back to the first direction again. There's maybe something in the distance. They turn around again and boom, there's the thing.
And it's
And
like,
it's
what?
all the same. And this movie does that twice, I want to say, which is
Yeah, at
where
least.
one in the midpoint and one toward there's one towards the end, which is so ridiculous, but they used it in the trailer, so I saw it and I was immediately like, oh, this
No.
is gonna be bad. The one where he runs out of the church.
Yeah, yeah. There's, I think it gets to a greater issue with modern horror in that jump scares are treated completely separately than what the horror of the core story is. Like, it's like jump scares are their own present element, and there's no attempt to meld the horror, which is bizarre to me because Dauberman's involvement with the It movies made me at least somewhat inclined to believe that he at least kind of understands this. Like, again, I'm not really sure. Like, that's at the end of the day, I think we have Muschietti to thank for what we got in the end product overall. We'll just forget that the Flash ever happened and let him do whatever now. But the thing is that there's just no attempt to make the core elements of Salem's Lot actually scary beyond jump scares. It's like it's this tragedy. Like the book literally opens up fast forwarded to the like years after this happens, and like like Salem's Lot is like in ruins. Like it's completely like dilapidated and abandoned by everyone. And it's just like you know where the story is headed the whole time. And there's no attempt to like capture that broody melancholy that's in the book, that like really like tragic sense of ennui that they or that King so deftly weaves into what the horror is beyond just being blah. And then I see a sequence like when our initial child is kidnapped, and it's like, dude, where was this the whole fucking time? Like, it's this absolutely crazy looking silhouette cutout thing with like this bizarre lighting choice of like pink, and it's like it's like this really hazy thing, and he's like walking, and then suddenly, like, you see like the fucking silhouette of the vampire just sort of come into frame and kind of glide, and it's like, that's fucking spooky. This is visually unlike anything I've seen in the last 5 years. What the fuck? And then right after that, we get like 10 straight more minutes of whatever the fuck. And it's like, it's shot like whatever. It's fine looking, I guess. And it also has the problem that I totally expected because it's Gary Dauberman, in that whenever we switch to the kids, I'm immediately more interested. Like, everything with the kids is like, all the actors feel like they're better than the adults, and they're more charming, and like the threat is more real to kids, and like that part of the book is so like legitimately cruel in how it treats its children characters. Like, I'm able to take the threats more seriously, whereas with the adults, I just never feel in danger for these people ever.
Right, which they do trip us up a couple times in that they change the fates of a couple of our principal characters in order to
Mhm.
make it more streamlined and give us more conventional kills than we get in the book. Because the thing about Stephen King is that he doesn't like killing off characters that he thinks are too interesting. So
Yeah,
a lot of his books have characters that are the worst people alive that exist for him as a prose exercise and also as a killing exercise.
I
Where
mean, that is it in a nutshell. It is an excuse for him to do whatever he fucking wants to the worst people alive.
and there's also like that's my favorite part of frankly it's one of my favorite parts of Salem's Lot is the characters. There's like a three or there's like a love triangle that
Hmm.
ends in a double murder. I'm also reminded of the two ladies in Needful Things who kill each other with axes at the heat of their
Oh,
argument.
that's a great shout. Yeah,
Um, and those kinds of characters are ones that Stephen King loves writing and are always kind of a secret weapon that he keeps in his back pocket. And this movie has none of those characters. You
not a
have
one.
okay. Let's get into our cast for a second. You have Ben, played by Lewis Pullman, who's legitimately very good in the movie.
Yeah,
Every I'll say
very
this.
good casting choice.
Yeah, everyone in the cast is doing a very serviceable job. There's not a single
Yeah,
person who I was like, that person doesn't look like they belong here. Some of them are giving more committed performances than others, but there's nobody that I could single out as being like, okay, that's the weak link in the mesh because it is still a relatively large cast. You've got Lewis Pullman, you've got
Mackenzie Lee is Susan.
Mackenzie Lee, Susan Norton, Alfre Woodard as Dr. Cody, the town doctor, who's a great choice.
Yeah,
Um,
she's perfect. Bill Camp as Matt Burke is one of my favorite, at least like in terms of how well they capture the character, in terms of like they don't give him a lot of the book's like backstory, but in terms of like characters, I'm like, yeah, that's Matt Burke.
yeah, you see the first scene of Bill Camp when he like is breaking up the fight between Matt and or Mark and one of the other kids, and you immediately get like, yeah, this is the guy. This is the cool English teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The cool English teacher, but also like in this movie especially, he is the voice of the dissonance in the town of like he's the idealicism. He's the kind of person that everybody wants to grow up to be, of just
Hmm.
like having a nice job, living a nice life in this nice town. And so when he gets pulled into the conflict, that's when you know that shit is starting to get real.
Real.
And Camp is great at capturing that. Also want to shout out John Benjamin Hickey as Father Callahan, who
Yes.
has a disappointing amount of screen time for how good he is.
Absolutely. Like, I really like, he kind of pops up late into the movie, and I was just kind of like, "Oh, I guess they're doing him now." And he shows up, and I'm like, "You nail the pathos of this character. Why is he in like 9 scenes?"
I the Toby Hooper movie also has this problem where like Father Callahan is clearly a character that King has a lot of emotional investment in, and it's
Hmm.
one that carries a lot of the thematic weights, especially in his fate. And both the Toby Hooper movie and this mince his role in a way that simplifies what is a really strong and really unexpected feature of the book, which is at the end of the book, instead of just killing him, the vampire forces the priest to cast aside the cross he's using as a weapon. And when he refuses, he's able to like penetrate his defenses and he forces him to drink his blood. And so Callahan doesn't become a vampire, but he becomes like cursed to no longer be able to tread on holy ground in the same way that
Hmm.
vampires are. And it's so fucked up.
It
It's
really is
so tragic.
like there's a considerable amount of religious trauma at the source of Salem's Lot, and it makes no bones about it. In fact, that's actually one of my favorite things that the anime adaptation Shiki does, is that it very much roots this in small town Japanese culture, but like the priest character in that like maintains a sort of church and shrine kind of thing. And they really play up his connection to the antagonists just to like add a lot more depth as they actually combine um Father Callahan and Bill Camp or and Matt Burke into one character in that story as like he's a writer who like mined some of his own religious trauma and feels kind of guilty about it. And like again, it plays with a lot of really interesting ideas, and there's so much potential in all of these characters. And I frankly don't think there's a better source of wasted potential in the movie than with Susan. Because to me, Susan is probably my favorite character in the book because she's also kind of like Matt Burke in the respect that like she is sort of almost she's like King's idea of what a good person is in Salem's Lot. Somebody who's pragmatic, who has kind of grown out of the cultural toxicity that could be within Salem's Lot and like kind of wants to get away, but she's still like connected to things like her mom and dad and what have you. And then she strikes up her relationship with Ben, which is like that's the crux of that story because that's, we ultimately see that erode when Susan gets turned. Like that's like the most tragic part of the novel is that Ben has to like it's a metaphorical way of him like putting everything in his past, like everything good from Salem's Lot has to be washed away from him, and he has to ultimately kill Susan. And it's just a greater sort of symptom of this problem that like with this runtime there's no way you can devote the amount of time their relationship needs to feel real. So when he ultimately does kill Susan, my reaction is like, oh, that's sad. And whereas in the book I'm like
It's harrowing.
like you feel like such garbage by the time you're done with Salem's Lot.
It's and that's the thing too, is that Salem's Lot is not a happy ending book. Even its tragedy is felt. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
sardonic aha, I gotcha bad ending. It is legitimately it's grim. It's
It's
grim and it feels bad, man.
that's again one of the things I respect the anime adaptation for is that if anything, like there is more kinship between that and Midnight Mass because the ending of the anime is like a fucking bloodbath. Like it's not even like, yeah, the book is a bloodbath, but in the anime it's like a full-blown fucking war. It's absolutely terrifying. Like it is the one adaptation of this story I've seen that has made me feel the same level of fear as King's prose, which is not easy. I completely put forward that it's like you're trying to capture the master of horror. I don't envy a single person who ever tries to adapt King in any way because you are like people generally are like kind of with Stephen King adaptations in general, and then even then when you have like a Stanley Kubrick come along and make The Shining, and it's like, yeah, the reason that movie's great is because it's basically nothing like the book anyway. So who cares? Like you just you get occasional instances like that, but when you get stuff like this where it does feel a bit, and I feel like I'm being a little not generous by saying this, but it does feel a bit assembly line in terms of how it's made. But then again, there are these, these little tiny sprinkles, these little filmmaking things where I'm just like, these people really fucking tried. I can tell that they fucking tried, and I applaud that. It just feels like it only happens in fits and starts. And there are occasional complete non-starters in the thing. Like I have in mind the set piece with the drive-in theater later in the movie
Let's
with the
talk about
sun.
that right now, actually. I wanted to get to
What in
that.
the goddamn hell is this
So,
scene,
so, so,
dude?
so, for one, the first sign that I knew this was gonna be bad, that I wasn't gonna have a good time, is that the Marston house is a non-object
It's
whatsoever.
in the very start and then basically not at all.
Because it's a core element of the imagery in the book that the Marston house is initially meant to be seen as like the haunted house where all the bad things happen, where
It's the house
nobody
on
is
Maple
supposed
Street.
yeah, where nobody is supposed to go. And the what the novel ends up doing is twisting that into being that kind of seed of darkness, it ends up spreading throughout the town, but it
Mhm.
starts there. And so when we only see the inside of that house during one scene and then we never go back to it again, and especially when they completely excise the childhood experience that Ben has in there, and in the opening scene of the movie, he's just out there taking pictures of it for yucks, I guess. Why is he even
Don't
there if that didn't happen to him?
I again, I have absolutely no idea, and I want to note this just because the more I think about it, the more actually likely I think that it is. But I believe it is the Marston house, or it's either that or another house where I because it's Halloween. Rhiannon and I just did a double feature of the two It movies, and like hand to God, they use the house that they gather in It Chapter 2 as a set in this movie. It is exactly the same. And it's like, wait a minute, if they're both Warner Brothers productions, that means that they do still have access to the same. Did they really just because like I'm like viewers at home, go back and watch these two, and I implore you to tell me that these two sets are different. Like the stairs, the way that they're set up, like they even have a similar shot setup. Like it was just something that I was like, wait a minute, what? They didn't even like change shit. Like it just looks the same. And the fact that it was shot earlier than it was, oh my God, I'm conspiracying so hard right now.
Yeah, I mean they were filming it. They were planning it at the same time that It Chapter 2 was coming out. So I'm sure they probably wanted to use that set for budget
Probably.
cuts. But anyway, that's not to say that's inherently a negative quality, but yeah, it
No,
does
not at
look
all.
kind of the same. Um, but they changed the climax of the movie to not happen in the Marston house, but instead happen at a drive-in movie theater in the town, which I believe is not a thing in the book at all. Is that
I
correct?
don't think so. At least not that I
It
remember.
doesn't matter um, for this explanation.
It's not Ben and Susan's first date. That's as much as I
Right, I
remember.
do remember that. They do this hokey thing where Ben and Susan go to the drive-in movie theater on their first date, and they do this, which I should have realized was foreshadowing. They do this very long sequence where a couple of extras crawl out of the trunk of a car, and Susan is
Yeah.
like, "That's like a tradition around here. You sneak into the drive-in movie theater." And I'm like, one, that's a tradition at all drive-in movies, and I know this because I've seen a movie before and I've talked to my relatives about this. You're not
Like, have you
special.
seen a film ever?
You're not special. They do this in the fucking Outsiders. Like,
Yeah, I was. It just seems like a very strange thing to put emphasis on. It's like, I mean, I get what you're going for, but like, if this is a way of trying to engender what the culture of Salem's Lot is like, it doesn't really do much.
it doesn't become anything much more specific than a place where a drive-in movie theater is with that little detail. But anyway,
Hmm.
the climax of the movie, the very end, is that who's left? Ben, Mark, and Dr. Cody. Everyone else
Hmm.
is dead. Are the only ones left. They've survived the night in Callahan's church. Callahan has already been killed elsewhere. And so they leave and they're like, oh, wait, where did everybody go? Where'd all the vampires go? Where's a place where all the vampires can hide? And initially in the book, they play it as everyone literally just goes home and goes to bed. And that's why they have
Hmm.
to set fire to the whole town because it's become so overtaken that they don't have to hide. They can just go back
Yeah.
to their houses. Um, but what ends up being the case is that everybody is in as at the drive-in movie theater, and all the vampires are using the trunks of the big cars as coffins to sleep in. And the characters somehow take the entire day to get to the movie theater. And so by the time that they get there and they're ready to start putting stakes in the vampires, the sun is already setting behind the screen,
The
and
screen.
it wakes the vampires up. And this whole climax is so bad.
It's so stupid. Like they're
It's
trying
so
to
bad,
race
man.
against the fact that the sun is setting and the shadow is eclipsing the screen. And so he like has to hide in the shadow and like run into the shadow as it gets lesser because of the oncoming night. And I'm just like, I really hate to be that guy. But this is simply not how any of this works or has ever worked in the history of physics in any universe ever. Like,
It
why
implies a
did this
very
happen?
like Mathesonian style of vampire where like as long as they are literally not being exposed to the direct rays of the sun, they will immediately pop out. Um,
Sometimes you gotta pop out and show fellas.
no. I mean, in this case, they are not like us.
No. That's actually the theme of Salem's Lot when you really think about it. Uh, I also have just discovered this makes everything about so much of this movie make more sense to me. Do you know who this is the cinematographer of?
no, I don't know off the top of my dome.
It is the cinematographer of Malignant. It explains entirely why half of this looks like a cheaply shot soap opera and the other half looks fucking amazing.
Yeah, that explains why, because I can't get that. I can't get that scene with the first kid that gets killed, Danny. I can't
Yeah,
get that Danny Glick kill scene out of my head. Jake
it's
already
great.
belabored this enough, but like, oh my God, I was riveted. There's like it's like a
Well,
point of view shot, but the kid's got a bag
oh,
over his head, so you
yeah.
only
Oh my
see like a
God.
slit. You only see like a slit, and the rest of the screen is black, and it keeps moving around. It's so
If
invigorating.
if only they brought that energy to it, because there's no in between with the horror sequences in this. It's either conjuring jump scare or incredibly inventive, really coolly shot set piece. Like they even switch up the moment where, like the iconic, the vampire floating down in front of the window, like that. Like they kind of extend that scene so that they don't do the more iconic thing that like the Toby Hooper one does, which I think is actually smart because like honestly, that's one of the best parts of that adaptation, and just trying to do it again just sounds like a bad idea. And like then they have this whole set piece with like the fog and everything, and I'm like, okay, this like we're playing with shit here. This is working for me. And then they bounce back and forth, and it is so inconsistent. There's so many shots in this that look fantastic. And also, I mean, like in a back and forth sense, like again, you said that the blocking in this is just a mess, and it really, really is. Like and it also it does not hurt that I again watched the It movies right before this, which regardless of your opinion on those movies, and I know many people have many of them, uh, those are Spielbergian and how well blocked they are, because one of them is shot by Chung Hoon Chun, in my opinion, the greatest living cinematographer. And that's not a fair basis for comparison, but at the same time, if you're the guy who shot Malignant, then I will hold you to a little bit higher of a standard,
I
honestly.
hold you a little bit, just a
Just a
little
tiny
bit.
bit.
Give me a little
And like,
something. They do an almost great Insidious 1 riff, which they completely ruin by drawing out the
yes,
setup.
yes, they did. I
Like
I
if that,
remembered that exact. I made that exact comparison to Re when we were watching it.
because the funniest part of the Toby Hooper movie is that scene
Yeah, yeah,
when
it
he
is.
pops up and he slams the two parents' heads together. Oh, I'll never forget it. It's such a great jump scare, but then he does that, and it's so goofy.
You're
And
you're
what they
like,
do with this. what they do with this is that Callahan and Mark are trying to convince their parents to get out of the house and go to the church. And they're like, no, Mark, shut the fuck up. What are you talking about? Um, Incidentally, the fact that they turned that family into a black family adds some depth to both
Hmm.
that scene and all of Mark's characterization that frankly I love. Great decision.
Yeah, Mark is the best thing in this movie. Like if I had to isolate one element that is consistently good, I like that kid. He's like it's like a good, well-directed kid perform. I mean, like it feels like they plucked him out of the It movies where all the kids are just like spitting heat the whole time because they are all great actors. And no exception here. He's like the likable sort of like pluckier underdog sort of kid, but like he is the character in this movie who gets the most shit done. Like he when the vampires come around, he does not fucking hesitate. He kills them so much faster than the adults in this, and honestly, it's badass.
It's cool. It's great. I love this actor. But no, the way that the scene is played out is that the door I think gets kicked open or somebody goes outside. One of the parents goes
Mhm.
outside and they hold on the open door with completely negative space for so long. And I'm just like, okay, somebody's going to get thrown through a window or somebody's going to get thrown through that door. Then it cuts away and it's Barlow, and Barlow's already here. And that's why I called it the Insidious bit, is because it's basically the same effect as the Insidious one jump scare with the demon over his shoulder.
Mhm.
And it almost works, except they draw it out too long, and so you completely know something's about to happen, which is a big problem with frankly all the Conjuring movies. That's why
Yeah.
I can't get into them as legitimately scary because they all feel like exercises in musicianship over anything done to create actual tension.
A tribute Pink Floyd band of filmmaking. Like they're playing the songs well, they're doing all the right things. Also, it is something I have heard before. It is something I've heard better. I'm not really sure why I'm hearing it now.
A lot of the cheaper filmmaking in the Toby Hooper movie goes a long way just because it's stuff that's never done before and it's stuff that's
Hmm.
taken with Toby Hooper's sense of gradual slow burn stuff even in its high octane moments. All the stuff in like Texas Chainsaw, for example, is really drawn out.
Oh yeah.
Nothing happens quickly in Texas Chainsaw, and nothing happens quickly in his Salem's Lot movie, except for when Barlow jumps up from underneath that table, which is what makes that
Oh.
moment work.
Oh yeah, like he knows how to play the like how dynamic the energy of the scene is in contrast to the movie itself. Like Hooper clearly has a great sense of rhythm that he brings to that adaptation that still make it the only version of this story that's been adapted that's still Salem's Lot that I think is really worth watching it in its entirety. This, to some extent, just because there are some more inspired filmmaking moments that, people might get a kick out of, but probably aren't worth watching an entire movie for. But that is like, it's consistent in tone, it's gradual, and it is longer, sure, but it also knows which parts to focus on while not gutting it completely of its appeal. Like that balance is mostly well maintained. It's just a damn shame about the guy that they got to play Ben.
Yeah.
The
Oof.
50-year-old man they got to play Ben.
And I also just, and here's where I think I'm reaching a conclusion here, but the 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 place of Salem's Lot in the lineage of American horror is well earned, but is also not anything that warrants a retreading.
Yeah, at least not in its original form. Like again, if you wanted to update it and again you went like the gentrification route, I, I don't really necessarily trust anybody who's not named Jordan Peele to do that. But
There's
I'm
movies
just
that already
saying,
do that, though. There's movies that
yeah,
already do that.
you're absolutely correct. And I mean like there's no well, before I move on to that, the one thing I want to make a point about is the villains in this movie. Specifically Straker and his minion
You got
Barlow
it
and
backwards.
Straker. And the one thing that I'm constantly a little disappointed by basically every, again, named version of Salem's Lot that's not the book is the fact that, like, they just sort of make Straker Barlow, they make Barlow just kind of a monster man, and that's kind of it. Whereas in the book, he's like this sinister, malevolent, conniving presence that's just like when he interacts with some of the characters, and in the movie he's just kind of like blah, and it's like okay, and the designs all right. I mean, it's not. It's
It's
I
a
don't
veiny,
really.
it's an extra veiny riff on the Toby Hooper Count Orlok design.
And it's not as good though. And like, not to mention, again, this is not the movie's fault, but like, I really feel sorry for anybody releasing a vampire movie in the year of our Lord 2024 because Robert Eggers is going to come around this Christmas and blow it out of the fucking water.
Well, and not to belabor it, but like the discussion of the use of vampires in American horror is also hopefully going to get a adrenaline shot of originality with the new Ryan Coogler joint coming out very
Oh, that's
soon.
gonna be so fucking baller. It's
Right, right, right,
gonna be
right.
so
And so
good.
I hope it is, and we'll probably talk about it on the show. But I don't envy anybody. I don't know why you would do this. Like there are so many, and we talked about this a little bit today with the recent news of Mike Flanagan starting work on a Carrie adaptation.
Hmm.
There are definitely Stephen King books that could use a fresh coat of paint. Salem's Lot is not one of them.
No, I mean, and what better proof do we have than the existence of Midnight Mass to basically prove every point that we're trying to make here? It's an elongated series that I truly feel sorry for like horror fans or for people who just like never sat down to watch Midnight Mass because genuinely, like, other than it being one of my favorite things that has been made this decade, like, we will probably not see another series like this for a very long time. Like, Flanagan was given carte blanche on that show to do what the fuck ever he wanted. And that is so rare now. Like, it is so, so rare to not have that level of studio executive meddling. And it shows through because Midnight Mass is long and indulgent and it takes its time, but the thing is that it's methodical, it's careful, and it does all of the same things that Salem's Lot the book does in a lot of ways, but you never feel like it's treading on old ground. You never feel like oh, these ideas were executed better elsewhere. If anything, I kind of think that Midnight Mass is the apex of all of these adaptations because it's the only one that doesn't really have an Achilles heel or a decided weakness. Like I think that that's one of the few things that actually transcends its inspirations just because it captures again that melancholy so well, and that ending is also like that is like the scene in the church, like to me that is one of the most effective pieces of horror that has been made in like this century because you're crawling out of your skin when you're watching that. It's like it's not like a bleh! You're just like you're there and you're like I want this to end. I want this to end. I want this to end. Please God let it end. Please God let it end. And it is terrifying and there's nothing like that in any other version of like Salem's Lot or anything like this. It's just it again, it's the attempt to make the horror part of the thesis of what you're making. And there's just no synergy. There's just a lot of single elements that all work in a vacuum and then you combine them together and it's like training a band and training them to play an instrument by themselves and then throwing them all on stage even though they've never played together before and you say play your parts and I'm sure they do a great job at playing their parts because they practiced. But when they're all together, it's probably going to sound like a fucking mess because they don't know how to interplay with each other. And that's what the filmmaking of this does. It's just like, yeah, a lot of these things are cool in isolation, but also like they don't enhance each other. There's no richness, there's no synchronicity, like there's no fucking, you need some je ne sais quoi, my dude.
Yeah, and they also this is another problem is they can't decide whether they're remaking the Toby Hooper movie or adapting the book.
Yeah, that is also a trend
So
that
many
just needs to stop.
so many of the most bold stylistic choices in this are direct lifts from the Hooper movie that are not
Hmm.
from the book at all. Like the idea that the crosses glow when they're working That's a Hooper
Yep.
movie take. The design of Barlow is very much akin to the Hooper movie and not really what uh Barlow is like in the book at all. Um, and so it just feels like a weird middle ground between we want to try to do Salem's Lot, but we need to have things in it that people recognize. And the more visually the more visually iconic parts of the Hooper movie were stuff that Hooper made up. So you have to have stuff that doesn't fit with what the book is doing.
And it's just so perplexing to me that this is the route people take with especially something like contemporary. And I know it may have not intended to be for streaming, but like I don't get this executive mindset of like, oh, you got to pepper in like all these things, these references to the Toby Hooper movie so that people will see things they recognize. It's like, motherfucker, you got them to sit down and watch this movie. Like the fact that I see things that will remind me of something else is not going to further incentivize me to finish the movie. Like I'm there, I'm sat, give me the film. Like, do people really watch movies in the sense that, like, oh, I'm 45 minutes in and I haven't seen anything that reminds me of the other version of this story. So, oh well, like who is these decisions are made for no one. It's the same thing that that executives have been fucking up since the beginning of the goddamn film industry is whenever something is successful, people are like, "Ah, this thing is successful. So let's do the thing until everyone fucking hates it." And it's like, no, the reason that this was good was because it was different than everything else. You need to copy the things that make something interesting that have nothing to do with like what it actually is. You want something that changes the framing, the circumstances, the macro. Like the micro doesn't fucking matter when it comes to this stuff. Like these granular details that you want to plant for your audience to be like, oh, hey, the new version of Pet Cemetery is gonna be really similar to the original Pet Cemetery. Nobody fucking cares about the original Pet Cemetery. The original Pet Cemetery sucks fucking ass. It's bad. Like
I
there
think
is
it's
no
okay.
human being alive that is going to watch that movie and be like, if the new Pet Cemetery isn't exactly like this one, I don't know, man. Like that is not a person. No one has ever thought this. No one.
Right. And Salem's Lot, I don't know. Salem's Lot is special to me. I care about it a lot. I frankly probably would have been a lot kinder to this if they had just at least done the like framing device epilogue
Mm-hmm.
just to give me a hook. Like at least do the first page of the book, please.
It just it
Shows
does.
that to me just shows how much you want to streamline this for people that don't really give a shit.
Yeah, that exactly. It's just like you want this in the moment success at the cost of what? You a bunch of people are going to watch this immediately and then forget about it in a month? Like, don't you want people to be more interested in this and it to have more longevity? Like, again, Midnight Mass is just something that exists and you can go to it wherever you want now and there's nothing like it. Like there's a market for what that is in terms of entertainment. Whereas with this, it's just like you're fulfilling the exact same like need. I know I'm talking about this in very like economic terms, but like that's what studio executives think about these days. And it just like I, I would be so much better at these people's fucking jobs than they would, and it is absolutely criminal that I am not.
All right, let's do a quick rating and maybe
Mm,
I feel like we've done enough, watch something else, but let's give one more shout out to just like something we've seen lately that we recommend. Let's start making this a
okay.
trope of Jake and Jen talk.
Okay, I like that. Um, for me, this is a hard 5 out of 10. Because I said this in my letterboxd write-up of it. This is one of the most staggeringly inconsistent films I have ever seen on screenwriting, on acting, on an adaptational, on a film, like every way in which something can be a mixed bag, this is. So it's a net neutral for me, where it's just like it does a lot of things that I admire and a lot of things that are very good, but it also does exactly enough wrong to make those things just kind of cancel out.
Yeah, I'm gonna also probably end up on a light five. No, no, it's a four. I'm not as nice to this kind of thing. Just frankly, I don't see the point. I don't see the point. I forgive it for a lot of its, it's good aesthetics, even in the midst of a lot of aesthetics I find tired and boring and insipid. It has
It's
some
trying.
nugget. It's got some nuggets in there. You can tell that
Hmm.
somebody along the way is trying to make a good movie. Um, but it just gets lost in, frankly, the fact that this is a failed from the start project.
Yep. Yep.
This is something that was kind of doomed to fail, at least in my eyes. Something I want to recommend, which I don't know, maybe we should talk about this on the show, so I'll keep my description of
Hmm.
it short. To stay in the Flanagan wheelhouse, I finally got around to The Fall of the House of Usher,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a lovely, very different than Midnight Mass, indulging in
Very.
a lot of unexpected sensibilities from Flanagan that I just think are really interesting. And, I've seen some purist takes on Flanagan's adaptations of classic literature, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. But I haven't seen really any of Fall the House of Usher hate, mainly because I think those same classic literature purists are into uh, kinky, fucked up queers, and this show is full of them, and I love
Oh,
it.
it is the most Flanagan-y thing that he's made. And I say that with all the love in the world. It is actually genuinely one of the most fascinating adaptations of anything I've ever seen. Because not only does like the Fall of House Usher, the original story is the framing device of the show. And basically everything that happens in between the framing device is more or less a Flanagan original thing that he also further goes on to adapt several Edgar Allan Poe short stories as the deaths of the Usher dynasty. Like one episode is just them doing the Telltale Heart. One episode is just them doing the Pit and the Pendulum. And frankly, it is just so awesome. Like I've never seen someone sort of take that sort of multimedia or like multi-textual approach to adaptation where it feels like it's not adapting any one thing. It's just here is my take on the work of Edgar Allan Poe, but we're also going to again make it contemporary and have a bunch of weird kinky queers in it and like it's something that has a completely separate appeal from Flanagan's other stuff because this is him on his like sick bastard mode. Like this is a very fun show. Like it has dark elements in it that like especially in that back half like woohoo Nelly. But
It's
it
it's
is
sadistic in a way that
yeah,
he's never been.
it is Flanagan exercising his because genuinely like I, I I have feelings about the thought of Carrie being adapted into anything other than a 90-minute movie, but he's at least earned me giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. But like with people talking about it and then just like trying to poorly imitate his writing style with therapy speak, which first of all is literally not how he writes. You're all incorrect. I'm sorry to tell you that you're wrong, but you are. That is simply not how his dialogue reads. You could say that it's long and rambly and that he has too many monologues, which you're also wrong about because you don't get off your goddamn phone and you're too busy watching TikTok to watch fucking, it's literally like
Get
2 minutes. Jesus
real.
Christ, you all. You fucking. Sorry, I'm gonna get all David Lynch. You're on your fucking phones, but like, people don't have attention spans anymore. So of course, when anything is longer than 3 minutes, they're just like, this is boring. But when they're talking about this, they completely neglect to mention this. Like Mike Flanagan, in terms of what he's done with modern horror and what he's like brought to the table, he's a sick son of a bitch. Like that man is sadistic as fuck. Like how do you watch a movie like Doctor Sleep and not be like, oh my, oh my God. And then you watch something like Midnight Mass and it's like, this is just one of the most like patently nihilistic things that I think I've seen in not just horror and like in fiction in the last 10 years.
The
And
difference, the difference with Fall of the House of Usher is that he's writing fan fiction about how he wants to murder all of the Sacklers.
it's
And so
fucking
he gets
awesome.
mean as hell to every single one of them. And I want to put a pin in this because I feel like we might have to do an episode on this in the future. So let's not
I
talk about it anymore.
absolutely. I completely agree. It's absolutely worth dissecting and it's weird just because it's probably like that and The Midnight Club are probably the two Flanagan projects that people just like have not seen at all. Uh,
We should also do the
I know
Midnight
like
Club.
some people watched Usher, but like I feel like that is definitely considered lesser in the minds of most people. Like I'm pretty sure more people watched Midnight Mass, which is not a lot.
All right, what's
Uh,
your rec? What's your rec for this episode?
well,
Doesn't have to be topical. It can be anything.
Uh, I'll go for a two-pronged approach then, just because one thing I will recommend is that I've mentioned it a couple of times, but if you need a good spooky thing to watch and you don't want to watch a television show that'll go like 8,000 episodes or anything, track down Shiki on the internet. It is amazing. Up until Midnight Mass, I was dead set considering that the best possible version of that story. Uh, it does play into the fact that like there are way more unlikable characters in it. But it does the Flanagan approach of we're making these people unlikable so that we can kill them in the most like comically brutal fashion that anybody has ever died. It's also one of the few anime that like I think that animation and horror is a very it's very tricky just because a lot of the time people just sort of use animation in the same way that they would use film and just sort of make a horror movie, but it looks animated. And it's like, that doesn't always work. This is one of the things that I feel like uses the medium of animation to be fucking scary. And it works. Like not a lot of horror anime genuinely like gets to me just because it lacks the viscera of like seeing a human being torn apart. But if you stylize it correctly, and the one weakness it has is that the character designs in this are absolutely fucking gonzo. Like, take a look at literally any character's haircut, and you'll be like, what? It does give more of an attention to the doctor character. Like the first half of this is like half horror, half episode of House MD, where he's trying to figure out what the virus that's overtaking the entire village is. But it's absolutely fantastic. It has a couple of OVAs that are pretty like good, and they also have theme songs that are done by the Japanese gothic metal band Bucktick, and they slam. It is so good. So if you were slightly let down by this or you are just interested in it, it is something that not enough people know about, and I would highly recommend that you do that. And I guess for a less a less related pick is that I recently rewatched something that it's not scary, but it's gothic. It's Halloween adjacent to me, and that being what I believe to be the best fictional, I guess, translation of Batman. Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. Not enough people have seen this movie, and that's fucking ridiculous because it's perfect. It's the same people who made Batman the animated series, like Bruce Timm, all of them, and put their they put their whole pussy into the 76 minutes of this movie. It is the best Batman score. I know how that sounds, but listen to the intro music of this, and I defy you to tell me I'm wrong. It has some of the best 2D animation I've ever fucking seen. Absolute perfect. I mean, you got Mark Hamill coming back as the Joker, and Kevin Conroy, rest in peace, does an amazing Batman, and it's perfect spooky watching just because it's just creepy. It leans into the horror of the Batman mythos really, really well, and also is like Salem's Lot is in its entirety a tragedy that, in my opinion, captures the character of Batman more succinctly and more acutely than basically any other adaptation we've ever got.
All right, everybody. Thanks for coming to the first official Jen and Jake talk. We'll see you next time.
We'll see you when we talk about we'll see you when Bleach is over. Um what have you by the way, have you heard that we're getting shit after Thousand Year Blood War?
I'm in the trenches. I'm in the fucking trenches. The Tite Kubo
Ah,
trenches. Let's go.
we're
Okay.
getting the Hell Arc, baby.
All right. All right. Until next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.